I took that home on as inadequate. So quite a challenge for my first registered role, but I figured I couldn't make it any worse. But within 6 months, when they came back, and it was pretty much 6 months to the day, they rated us good. We skipped over requires improvement, and I didn't think that was possible. I have a zoo at home. I've got 2 cats, 2 dogs, a parrot and some fish, and a husband. It takes my mind out of work and stops me from thinking about work. Communication is key. I think if I'm going to say no to someone, I will always explain to them why I'm saying no, and we will have a discussion about it. And quite often I will put my question back to them and ask them what they would do in my position. My favourite place in the entire world is Egypt. And I absolutely love everything Egyptian.
Hello, today on the Social Care Chronicles at Rehability UK, we're talking with Nicola Ford, the Regional Area Manager for the South West. Nicola, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's good to see you too.
What was your first job in social care and what did you learn from it?
My first job within social care was an administrator for a residential home for people with profound and multiple learning disabilities for MenCap. And within 6 months, I realised how much I loved interacting with the people that were supported there. So I did my support training and then did a dual job of administrator and support worker for that particular residential home.
What was it that made you want to work in health and social care in the first place?
I didn't. I was an administrator and I'd worked for my sins. I'd worked for the Child Support Agency. Yeah. I'd been an estate agent. I'd worked for the Children and Family Courts. And this was just another admin job. It just happened to be in a care setting.
So is it fair to say you kind of just fell into the care side of it?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. And was that a happy thing for you when you look back?
My first day I drove home in tears because I'd never been around anybody with multiple disabilities. And it was quite a shock to the system. But I went back and I kept going back. And as I say, after 6 months, I'd done the support worker training. And it was just a real pleasure. It was such a happy accident that I'd fallen into that. And I can't now imagine 15 years on doing anything different.
Now that you know that was a happy accident, if that accident didn't happen, where do you think your life would have gone?
I am pretty confident that I would have spent £10,000 on the police forensic science course, which was a 10-week course, and I would potentially now be a forensic lab tech or something for the police.
So instead of that, you're working here at Rehability UK. So what would you say has been the biggest impact on your career in your time in social care?
There are a few, to be honest, both positive and negative, which actually have quite a big impact. So the manager that I had at MenCap, she was a huge inspiration and a big impact. She gave me the role of assistant manager there, and that was quite a decision for her because I think everybody had thought, you're going to get the job because you're her mate. And it was good that she had to go higher up to show that I got the job on merit, not because we were friends. The next impact, I think, has got to be the CQC inspector. Now, she transitioned with me over 3 or 4 different organisations that I'd worked for in a registered position and was my CQC inspector for all of them. So we built quite a good relationship. Not always positive. We had an inadequate rating at one point and she helped us through, and it was very much a collaborative approach, but she made my standards of what I expected from my staff teams to be a lot higher than they were before. They used to say that if this inspector gave you good, you were really outstanding, because she set the bar a lot higher than some of the others.
Having those people sort of giving you sort of stretch targets and things like that has really helped you?
Yeah, and I think the negative feedback that you get also, I'm the kind of person that it will push me to prove people wrong. So if someone thinks or sort of says that I can't do something, or they don't think I would be able to, whether it's another manager who doesn't like the limelight being taken off them and bullying within the workplace, I tend to push against that. I don't agree with it, and it makes me work harder.
What's been your proudest professional moment that you've had in your time in care?
The first registered position I had was a residential elderly care home for a charitable organisation. And I took that home on as inadequate. So quite a challenge for my first registered role, but I figured I couldn't make it any worse. So it was a good place to start. And initially, I worked with a lot of other managers who'd been overseeing the service. We got it up to requires improvement. Sadly, we went back down in the next inspection to inadequate. But within 6 months, when they came back, and it was pretty much 6 months to the day, they rated us good. We skipped over requires improvement, and I didn't think that was possible. So I phoned the CQC inspector and asked her if she'd sent me the wrong report by accident because it was good. And she said, no, I can see how much work you've put in 6 months. So to leap over and make that very uncommon step of kind of missing a rating was really proud for me and the team. It's a team effort. It's not something that you do single-handedly.
Sure. How do you deal with like tough situations in the workplace? So when you've suddenly got something like a bit of a panic on, or there's been an incident, or something's kicked off, what is it that you do to get yourself in a place where you can actually deal with that?
I stop and literally shut myself away for a minute, 2 minutes. Just obviously if it's safe for me to do so, and just give myself time to think things through, because having been in that situation a couple of times, whether it's an unexpected sad passing of one of your residents or an accident where someone is bleeding and they need emergency services, it's really important not to panic. Everybody else is looking to you to be able to manage the situation. If you're there, it's important that you stay calm so that everybody else stays calm. Because if you've got a resident who's hurt themselves and you're looking at them and screaming, that's probably not the best reaction for them.
Sure.
So it's about making sure that you do take that time to process all the information and then make the right decisions.
Can you tell me an unexpected moment at work you always remember as a funny moment? Something that really happened and you just can't quite pinch yourself and to realise that it did happen?
First thing that comes to mind, I, as deputy manager, was picking up a support shift to cover the service, and one of the things was to take a client out. This particular lady never liked to be at home, and the behaviours would come about when she was in the property. So I was tasked on that day to take her out. So when we went to the donkey sanctuary, she was petting a donkey and a goat was chewing on her trouser leg. So I went to move the goat away from her trouser leg and looked up, and the donkey had started chewing on her hair. So, and she thought it was hilarious. She was in her absolute element, donkeys licking her face and chewing on her hair and things like that. Yeah. But obviously it's an incident form, needs to be reported. And then when we were in the museum and she was looking around, she ended up scratching her face. And that was another scratch that I had too. So it was, she had the most fabulous day out. Yeah. But from my point of view, I was panicked about the fact that, goat was eating trousers, donkey was eating hair, and she'd scratched her face and started bleeding. And I was going to have to get back and do incident forms and reams of them. So that it was a funny situation because she absolutely loved her day out.
But it shows actually the different ways care is delivered. Suddenly that has implications for everything else that happens along the way. Yeah. And I think, looking from the outside in, you just don't necessarily understand from the outside of care what is actually involved.
No, and it's positive risk taking. I think that was the lesson I learned from that, because I was a bit worried that I should have been paying more attention maybe, and I'd done something wrong. And actually, it's all about positive risk taking. She wasn't injured. It was an interesting experience for her. She seemed to have a fabulous day, and it was a learning experience for me to know that it's fine to put people in positions that they might be enjoying if there was a small risk, and you know, the benefit of her being out and enjoying herself absolutely outweighed the risk of a pair of trousers being chewed.
Sure. So, apart from trousers being chewed and goats eating hair, what would you say has the most been a really rewarding moment that stays with you and has stayed with you during your career?
There was a gentleman in the service within MenCap who sadly was put on an end-of-life pathway and was taken into hospital, and I spent the whole week leading up to him sadly passing away doing the waking night shift every night. So he was unresponsive, he was sort of unaware of where he was. But we were tasked to sort of spend some time with him. Should he sort of wake up, he would see a familiar face. I'd made over the 5 years, I'd had quite a good relationship with him, and yeah, it was quite nice to be with him in his last moments, and that will always be something that I remember feeling privileged about, that I'd got to be supportive of him and his family in those last moments.
And I imagine that's kind of a bittersweet type of memory, because you've spent so much time with somebody, you've created a relationship, and then in the end it kind of ends, and that must be hard to deal with. How do you cope with that?
It's difficult. The further up you go in this job, I think the more challenging it gets and the less fun it can be. You are managing an elderly care home, and actually, there's a lot of situations where you're expecting people to slip away, and you do become a bit robotic about it, and actually potentially to protect yourself from that emotion continuously, I think my manager brain switches on a lot of the time, and actually that tends to start bleeding into your private life as well.
You're here at Rehability and you've just recently joined us. So what made you sort of choose to work with Rehability UK, and what was it about the role that really interested you when you applied?
The job I had before this was working up and down the UK for a case management company, and I really struggled with the fact that the financial aspect of that is very much controlled by someone else, and I didn't have the freedom to visit clients and didn't feel that I was able to fully do my job and be legally responsible and make sure that we were CQC compliant if I wasn't able to visit when I felt I needed to. Right. And actually, since I left MenCap, I've wanted to get back to that job, working with people with learning disabilities in any sort of remit, really, whether it's residential or supported living. And when I saw this job, I knew that it felt like I was going to be stepping back to what I felt was home, which was more of a MenCap situation. So it's been really lovely in the last 7 to 8 weeks to have gone out to the services, and I've gone to a Christmas party for 3 services, and I've met 90% of the people we support and the staff teams, and it feels a little bit, I mean, again, another cliche, but it feels like I'm home again.
With that coming home feeling and getting out to see the people we support and the people you're supporting and your teams are supporting, what's it been like sort of rediscovering all of that again?
It's been really nice. I've gone home with a smile on my face every day, and that's just really nice, rather than finishing work thinking about, I mean, I'm aware that I'm still early days, so my phone isn't ringing as much as it will in another couple of months. What my first impression of Rehability is the fact that you've got a lot of staff who have started off at support worker roles and worked their way up, and there's a lot of people, even if they've wanted to remain at the same role, they've been around for 5 plus, 10 plus years. And I actually got to deliver a certificate and a voucher to a staff member who'd reached their 5-year mark. And that's just really nice, the fact that there's not a huge turnover of staff.
When you're in the midst of it all, and it must be really tough at times, how do you care for your own mental health in amongst everything else that's going on?
There are so many different ways. So I have a zoo at home. I've got 2 cats, 2 dogs, a parrot and some fish, and a husband. I've got quite a few rubbish, mind-numbing games on my phone.
Right.
And various true crime books that I read. So that's kind of, it's a bit morbid, but, reading about Rose and Fred West, and it takes my mind out of work and stops me from thinking about work.
Right. Tell me a bit more about all those animals. How do you manage all those animals?
They're not as complicated as you might think. They all get on fairly well. So the 2 dogs get on very well, but unfortunately, instead of the younger one growing up and maturing to be like the older one has now seemed to become a puppy again. So they're both running around like absolute lunatics. Yeah. The youngest cat comes on walks with us when we do dog walks.
Oh, really?
Yes, neighbours say there's a cat following you, and we have to say, yes, it's our cat.
Oh, wow.
And if it's too busy or we're later on, then she will just sit at the bottom of the road waiting because she knows where we come back. And the other cat, unfortunately, I think is starting to get to the age where he's not always aware of where he is. So that's a bit of a challenge. I found him asleep in the litter tray the other day. He's happy enough, but yeah, he's old and he doesn't really do anything anymore. And the parrot hates my husband.
Oh, no.
But loves me, so that's what I wanted, in the sense that loving me, because they often pick a single person. Right. But I do spend quite a lot of time teaching her how to talk.
Oh, wow.
So she can say hello, bye-bye, peekaboo, and come on.
Oh, wow.
At the moment.
Cool.
Yeah, so my husband's trying to teach her how to swear at this exact moment.
Successfully
probably.
yet? Or not?
I'm sure I can hear something, but I think it's like when you're a parent and you can understand what a baby is saying. So I'm not sure, but I'm sure I can hear certain words.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but he's left on his own now because he's there more than I am now.
Right.
So yeah, whatever the parrot is going to learn will be because of him.
Okay, so you'll know who to pin it on.
Yes, I take no responsibility for the swearing.
Brilliant. Once you're back in work again, what is it that makes and build strong and successful teams?
Communication is key. I think if I'm going to say no to someone, I will always explain to them why I'm saying no, and we will have a discussion about it. I'm all up for suggestions from every person within the team, because I think doing the job frontline day in, day out, they are the best placed people to let me know what's going to work and what's not. But I think communication, I think leading by example, as I said earlier, I think up to a point, trying to keep your team happy as much as is possible. You're going to have to upset some people at some time, but it's about, and again, that communication filters into that, because I think if you make them understand why, and quite often I will put my question back to them and ask them what they would do in my position, because I think it gets them to realise, actually, this is a bigger picture. It's not just about me, and doing that for me might impact everybody else, and I can see why you can't do that. So I think that sometimes helps.
And if you could change one thing about how people perceive people with mental health issues or learning disabilities or with autism, and if you could change one thing about that perspective in the wider UK community, what do you think that would be?
I think the perception with LD has already changed. I think that shifted a little while ago, but I think there is still a stigma attached to mental health conditions. And I think if I can change something, it would be that they're not, I would make people understand that not everybody with a diagnosed mental health condition is dangerous. They're not all about to go and get a gun or a knife or, trap somebody in their property, or they have their own issues, and we all have mental health. And it's about being more understanding. I think that with the right support, people can lead, in quotes, normal lives. Yeah.
Whether you're working from home or you work in an office, which one do you prefer? Which and why?
Both and neither.
Both and neither.
Both and neither. I think having spent the last 15 months working at home, it's nice. You don't have to put on grown-up clothes. You can use a Snapchat filter on Teams, so you don't need to put makeup on or do your hair. That's quite nice. And there is that flexibility of being on your own. I'm quite conscientious, so I know that, having spoken to other colleagues in previous jobs, they've said I'd be watching telly all day. I wouldn't be able to be that structured, and I don't. If anything, I work through my lunch. Right. But I think there are pros and cons with that, just as there are. So I've got an hour's travel each day to the office now. 2 hours, one hour there, 1 hour back, which means that my day is 8 till 6 as a minimum rather than 9 to 5. But also I get to interact with 4 or 5 lovely people in the office. We can sort of bounce ideas off each other, we can talk to each other, we can help each other out. And I think from a mental health perspective, sometimes just being around other people is helpful.
And what's the most memorable trip you've ever taken in your life, and why was it so memorable?
My favourite place in the entire world is Egypt.
Oh, really?
And I absolutely love everything Egyptian. I've done a hieroglyphics and an Egyptology diploma. I've visited tombs and various kind of places in Egypt, and I absolutely love it. So for that reason, it was memorable. But then for other reasons, other holidays have been memorable. It's difficult to pinpoint because different holidays mean different things.
Yeah. You obviously know the South West pretty well. So if you could recommend a brilliant spot for someone to unwind, where would that be?
It would be the Hotel Ensley in Devon. Oh, really? It is incredible. It's not cheap, and I've only had lunch there twice, but it is an astonishingly beautiful place. And if not there, Burr Island. So you've got any sort of inclination to visit Agatha Christie's sort of areas where she used to sit and write the books. Again, it's an experience getting on the tractor, which takes you over when the tide starts coming in and you get cut off. So that's a beautiful place as well. But I'm a very lucky person. We've got beaches within 20 minutes. I've got the Barbican. I've got historical sites in Plymouth. And we've also got the moorland and, so it's just a really beautiful place.
What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out as a support worker in care?
Give it time. I think I have seen a few people start and decided it's not for them within a couple of days. And I think actually the more intimate personal care that you've sort of quite often tasked with, not everywhere, but I think sometimes that can be a challenge. It can be a hurdle for people to get over. And actually, I think give it time, because you may not feel like you will ever be able to cope with it, but after maybe a month, it becomes second nature and you don't even think about the kind of things that you're doing. You're more focused on making the person you're supporting feel at ease.
So, Nicola, thank you for coming in today and talking to us on Rehability UK, the Social Chronicles. It's been a pleasure to hear about all the things you've been involved in, but also the things that you're hoping to do here at Rehability. So thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.